On September 28, 2001, a 14-year-old cheerleader attended a party in Cantonment, Florida. She was seen getting into a white Lincoln Town Car. She was seen at another party later that night, and then Danielle Bell vanished. Not a trace, not a scrap of fabric, not a single strand of hair. It's as if the earth simply swallowed her whole that Friday night, and in the 23 years since, no one has been able to find even the smallest piece of evidence that tells us what happened to her. But the people who were with her that night, they know something, and some of them are still walking free. Danielle Bell's story isn't about the picture-perfect teenage girl. Her life wasn't easy. It was hard, and it was tragic in ways that no child should ever have to experience. Her parents had separated when she was young, but she maintained relationships with both of them. Her father appears to have been her rock, her voice of reason in a chaotic world. Her sister has made it her life's mission to find answers, to bring justice to the memory of that missing 14-year-old child. Despite everything Danielle faced, she was good in school. She was a cheerleader, she had friends, but beneath the surface, she was fighting a battle that she would eventually lose. In the days and weeks leading up to September 28, 2001, Danielle's life changed drastically. She had begun what people called dating a man named Alfredo Gomez Sanchez Jr. But let's be clear about something right now. When we say dating, we're not talking about teenage romance. We're talking about a grown man and a 14-year-old child. Her family would later discover that Alfredo was 10 years older than Danielle. 10 years. She was a child, and he was a predator. In the weeks before her disappearance, Danielle told friends that she was pregnant with Alfredo Sanchez's baby. She also described an incident involving gang rape. She was the victim, and Sanchez was involved. To understand what happened to Danielle, you have to understand her mother. Sometimes bringing a child into the world is much easier than raising and nurturing one. Danielle's mother was not the type of mother anyone would want or ask for. She was haphazard in her parenting, to put it mildly. She had entered the world of illicit drugs and prostitution, and she would risk her own child for her next fix. This isn't speculation. This is what the evidence shows. Danielle's mother knew exactly what was happening to her daughter, and she did nothing to stop it. In fact, she made it worse. On September 28, 2001, Danielle attended a party at Heritage Park on Wellline Road in Cantonment, Florida. Witnesses saw her get into a white Lincoln Town Car with Alexander Sanchez, the brother of Alfredo. From there, she went to another party at Robert Bassett's residence on Cedar Tree Lane, and that's where the trail goes cold. That's the last confirmed sighting of Danielle Bell. She was 14 years old, and she was surrounded by dangerous men who had already hurt her in unspeakable ways. 2 days passed before Danielle's mother even called her father to tell him that Danielle was missing. 2 days. When he found out, he was furious. He demanded that she call the police immediately and report Danielle missing. But when law enforcement got involved, they made a decision that would haunt this case for years. They classified Danielle as a runaway. They lowered the priority of her case. This is still common practice today, unfortunately. When a teenager goes missing, especially one from a troubled home, police often assume they've just run away. They don't treat it with the urgency it deserves, and in Danielle's case, that assumption may have cost her her life. When authorities questioned Danielle's mother about who Danielle had been dating, she initially told them it was Alexander Sanchez, the much younger brother of Alfredo Sanchez. She lied. Months would pass before the truth was revealed, and years before the full extent of the crimes against Danielle and other young women were made public. It came as no surprise to Danielle's father and sister that her mother knew Alfredo Sanchez's age all along. But out of self-protection, she refused to give law enforcement that information, causing further delay in the investigation. She was protecting herself, not her daughter. The truth that eventually came out was even more horrifying than anyone initially realized. Danielle hadn't just been in a relationship with a man over 10 years her senior. The 14-year-old had been sold into the world of prostitution by her own mother. She put her daughter's life at extreme risk, not only to Sanchez and Bassett, but to every other man she was forced to be with. Danielle was being trafficked by the person who was supposed to protect her most. Today, both law enforcement and Danielle's family have accepted that she was most likely the victim of homicide on September 28, 2001. Danielle's sister and father have never stopped searching for her. They've never given up hope of finding answers, of bringing her home, of getting justice for what was done to her. And while the two most likely suspects are currently in prison today, Danielle's family knows that the crimes they are convicted of pale in comparison to what they most likely did to that 14-year-old cheerleader. Let's talk about the facts we know for certain. Danielle Bell was last seen in the company of Alexander Sanchez, Alfredo Gomez Sanchez, and Robert Bassett on September 28, 2001. After years of searching, not a scrap of fabric or a strand of hair has been located. It's as if life for her ceased to exist on that Friday night. Danielle has never been seen again. Alfredo Gomez Sanchez and Robert Bassett were very close friends. Both Sanchez and Bassett are very violent offenders with documented histories of hurting people. Alfredo Gomez Sanchez Jr. was eventually sentenced to Florida State Prison on multiple charges of lewd and lascivious molestation of a child from 12 to 15 years old, with the offender over 18. He was also convicted of sexual battery on a child 12 to 15 years old, with the offender over 18, and intimidating a witness. One of those charges includes crimes against 14-year-old Danielle. Sanchez is currently scheduled to leave prison on June 11, 2046. He'll be an old man by then, if he makes it that long. Robert Bassett, one of the last known people to see Danielle that day, is also spending time in the Florida Department of Corrections. His release date is November 28, 2025. That's this year. Bassett is also a violent offender. And here's something chilling. When someone on social media asked Bassett, "Where is Danielle, that missing white girl you were last seen with?" his reply was, "In the hog pen, where your ugly self needs to be." Think about that for a moment. A man who was one of the last people to see a missing 14-year-old girl makes a joke about her being in a hog pen. That's not just callous. That's potentially a confession hidden in plain sight. There are two other suspects as well, Christopher Rivera Brown and Alexander Sanchez. All of them attended the party at 588 Cedar Tree Lane, the home of Robert Bassett, on the night Danielle disappeared. All of them have remained largely silent about what happened that night. All of them know more than they're saying. Danielle Bell was a much-loved 14-year-old child, a 14-year-old who never had the opportunity to grow up. Yes, she made mistakes. We all do. But those mistakes should not have defined how her case was handled or how she was projected into the eyes of the public. She could have overcome her childhood tragedies. She should have had that chance. She should always remain treasured in the hearts of all of us who hear her story. As parents, we have a responsibility to ensure our children grow up and become valued members of our society. We can begin doing this by focusing on individuality rather than conformity. We need to embrace imperfections and celebrate unique qualities. We need to acknowledge challenges and support personal growth. This approach fosters a stronger sense of self-worth. Hug your children and love them unconditionally, because Danielle didn't have that. And look what happened. Let's be clear about something else. When adults say that Danielle was dating Alfredo Sanchez, that's not an accurate description of what was happening. This was sexual abuse. This was battery. This was emotional abuse committed by a grown man against a 14-year-old child. We need to call it what it was. Danielle was being raped. She was being trafficked. She was being destroyed by the very people who should have protected her. Danielle's case remains unsolved, but her family hasn't given up. They continue to push for answers. They continue to keep her memory alive. They continue to demand justice, and they need our help. If you know anything about what happened to Danielle Bell on September 28, 2001, please come forward. If you were at those parties that night and saw something, please speak up. It's never too late to do the right thing. Danielle's family deserves to know what happened to her. They deserve to bring her home. They deserve justice. The men who hurt Danielle, who likely killed her, have gotten away with it for over 2 decades. They've lived their lives while Danielle's family has lived in agony, not knowing where she is or what happened to her. That's not justice. That's not right. And it needs to change. Robert Bassett will be released from prison this year. He'll walk free while Danielle remains missing. That should make all of us angry. That should motivate all of us to demand better from our justice system. Danielle Bell's story is a tragedy on every level. It's a story of a child failed by the adults who were supposed to protect her. It's a story of a justice system that didn't take her disappearance seriously enough. It's a story of predators who continue to walk among us. But it's also a story of a family that refuses to give up, that continues to fight for answers, that continues to love and remember a girl who deserved so much better than what she got. Danielle was a cheerleader. She was a daughter. She was a sister. She was a friend. She was a child, and she deserves justice. That's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and be kind to each other. On the evening of June 30th, 2005, 19-year-old Jenny Nicholl kissed her parents goodbye and walked out the front door of their home in Richmond, North Yorkshire. She carried camping gear with her, telling her mom and dad she was spending the night with friends. It was 6 o'clock in the evening, and the summer sun was still high in the sky. Jenny was a guitarist who played in local pub bands, worked at the supermarket, and had her whole life ahead of her. That was the last time anyone who loved her would see her alive. What happened next would become one of the most disturbing cases in British criminal history, a case that would be solved not by finding a body or a crime scene, but by the words someone typed into a mobile phone. Jenny's family had moved to Richmond when her father, who served in the British Army, was posted to nearby Catterick Garrison. Her older brother had also joined the army and was stationed there, so the family put down roots in this historic market town. Jenny seemed like a typical teenager. She had friends, she had her music, she had her job, but beneath the surface of her ordinary life, something dark had been happening for years. Since Jenny was just 14 years old, a man named David Hodgson had been grooming her. He was 45 years old at the time of her disappearance, married with 2 daughters who had attended the same school as Jenny, St. Francis Xavier School in Richmond. Hodgson would later claim that the abuse wasn't sexual until Jenny turned 16, and that they'd only had sex 5 times. But the truth was far more sinister than he would ever admit. When Jenny didn't come home and her parents couldn't reach her, they began to worry. By July 4th, 4 days after she'd left, they reported her missing to the police. Her white Rover 214 was found parked at the Holly Hill pub in Richmond, but there was no sign of Jenny herself. The investigation began immediately, and 9 days after her disappearance, North Yorkshire police brought David Hodgson in for questioning. During that first interview, Hodgson denied everything. He denied abusing Jenny. He denied having anything to do with her disappearance. He acted like he barely knew her, but the police weren't convinced. Then something strange happened. The day after Hodgson's interview, Jenny's mobile phone suddenly switched on. Text messages began arriving to her family and friends. The messages suggested she was alive and well, camping somewhere far from home. You can imagine the relief her parents must have felt. Ann Nicholl, Jenny's mother, immediately traveled to the locations the messages seemed to be coming from. One message appeared to originate from Carlisle in Cumbria. Another came from Jedburgh in the Scottish borders. Anne searched desperately in both places, hoping to find her daughter safe and sound. But something about those messages didn't sit right with the police. The way they were written, the words that were used, something felt off. While the investigation continued, police found David Hodgson at the end of July in a hut near Hudswell. He'd taken an overdose of pills and wine. After he recovered, police interviewed him again. This time his story changed. Now he admitted that he and Jenny had been lovers, but he claimed their affair had ended 12 months before her disappearance. He was trying to distance himself from her, to make it seem like whatever they'd had was ancient history. But investigators were starting to piece together a very different picture. The police launched a massive search operation that lasted throughout the summer of 2005. They searched over 150 different areas. They looked in septic tanks at farms. They even brought in soldiers from Cataract Garrison to help comb through the countryside. They were looking for Jenny's body because by now, despite those text messages, they were becoming increasingly certain that she was dead. In November 2005, the police officially changed the investigation from a missing person case to a murder inquiry. Those hopeful text messages that had sent Anne Nicholl racing across northern England were now seen for what they really were, a cruel deception. As investigators dug deeper into Jenny's life in the weeks before her disappearance, they uncovered another troubling detail. Jenny had started seeing David Hodgson's older brother, Robert. Robert claimed he had no idea about his younger brother's relationship with Jenny, which seemed almost impossible to believe. The two brothers had worked together building ramshackle huts in a place called Sandbeck Plantation, hidden away in the woods south of Richmond near the A6136 road. These huts would become crucial to the investigation. When police searched these hidden structures in Sandbeck Plantation, they found items that made their blood run cold. Jenny's nightdress was there, her teddy bear was there, her cassette player was there, and they found DNA evidence that proved Jenny had been in those huts, despite David Hodgson's denials. The prosecution would later argue that Hodgson had become intensely jealous when he learned about Jenny's relationship with his brother Robert. They believed that jealousy had turned to rage, and on the night of June 30th, 2005, David Hodgson had murdered Jenny Nicholl. In December 2005, Anne Nicholl appeared on the BBC program Crime Watch, making an emotional appeal for help in finding her daughter and bringing her killer to justice. It would be another year and a half before charges were finally brought. In May 2007, police formally charged David Hodgson with murder. He appeared in Northallerton Magistrates Court that same month and was remanded in custody to await trial. The trial began in January 2008 at Teesside Crown Court. Hodgson denied everything. He denied taking Jenny to his huts in Sandbeck Plantation. But the DNA evidence told a different story. The nightdress, the teddy bear, the cassette player, all of it pointed to Jenny having been there. The prosecution painted a picture of an intensely jealous man who couldn't bear the thought of losing his victim to anyone else, not even his own brother. They believed Hodgson had killed Jenny on the night she disappeared, then spent the following days trying to cover his tracks. This is where the case became truly groundbreaking. The prosecution brought in experts in forensic linguistics to analyze those text messages that had been sent from Jenny's phone. These experts compared the writing style, the word choices, the grammar and punctuation of the messages to Jenny's known writing. What they found was damning. The messages didn't match Jenny's style at all. They were written by someone else, someone trying to impersonate her, but failing to capture the way she actually communicated. It was like watching someone try to forge a signature, but getting the loops and curves all wrong. But the prosecution didn't stop there. They obtained records showing that David Hodgson had hired a car on July 9th and July 14th, 2005. When they calculated the distances traveled on those days, they matched almost exactly the distances from Richmond to Carlisle and back, and from Richmond to Jedburgh and back. And those dates? They were the exact same dates that the fake text messages had been sent from Jenny's phone. Hodgson had driven to these distant locations, turned on Jenny's phone, sent messages to make it look like she was alive and camping, then driven back home. He thought he was being clever, creating a trail that would lead police away from Richmond, away from him. During the trial, Hodgson's elder daughter testified that she had seen Jenny alive in Richmond 2 days after her disappearance, claiming Jenny had been staying with Robert. But Robert Hodgson denied this completely, stating he hadn't seen Jenny for some time before she vanished. It seemed like a desperate attempt to create reasonable doubt, to suggest that maybe, just maybe, Jenny had been alive after June 30th. But the evidence against David Hodgson was overwhelming. In February 2008, the jury returned their verdict. David Hodgson was found guilty of murdering Jenny Nicholl. He was sentenced to life in prison with a recommendation that he serve at least 18 years. He had been convicted despite the lack of a body, despite the lack of a crime scene, despite never finding where he had disposed of Jenny's remains. The fake text messages, the DNA evidence, the hired car records, and the forensic linguistics analysis had been enough to prove beyond reasonable doubt that he had killed her. The case had significant implications beyond just this one conviction. In September 2008, the Council for the Registration of Forensic Practitioners officially recognized forensic linguistics as a specialty. The evidence given in cases like Jenny Nicholl's murder and the murder of Danielle Jones, another case where a body was never found, had demonstrated that the way people write and communicate can be as unique as a fingerprint. Murderers who thought they could hide behind fake text messages and emails were now on notice that their words could betray them. In November 2009, a coroner officially ruled that Jenny Nicholl was dead and that her death was an unlawful killing. It brought a legal closure to the case, even though the most painful question remained unanswered. Where is Jenny? To this day, her body has never been found. David Hodgson has never revealed what he did with her remains. Anne and Brian Nicholl have never been able to lay their daughter to rest, never been able to visit a grave and leave flowers. That final cruelty, that last act of control, Hodgson has maintained even from behind bars. Jenny Nicholl was just 19 years old when her life was stolen from her. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a musician. She had dreams and plans and a future that should have stretched out before her for decades. Instead, she became a victim of a predator who had been grooming her since she was a child, who saw her not as a person, but as a possession, something he owned and controlled. When she tried to move on with her life, when she started seeing someone else, he couldn't accept it, and so he took everything from her. This case reminds us of several important truths. First, that grooming is insidious and can happen right under our noses, even in small communities where everyone thinks they know everyone else. Second, that advances in forensic science, including the analysis of how we communicate, are giving investigators new tools to catch killers who think they've been clever. And third, that even when a body is never found, justice can still be served. The absence of remains doesn't mean the absence of evidence. For Anne and Brian Nicholl, the pain never ends. Every birthday, every holiday, every anniversary of that June evening when Jenny walked out the door is a reminder of what they've lost. They've marked each year since 2005 without their daughter, always hoping that one day Hodgson might finally tell them where Jenny is, might finally give them that small mercy. But so far, he's remained silent. That's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and be kind to each other.